The crimson sun hung low over the dusty horizon, as Katherine Elliott watched her last chance at happiness disappear in a cloud of dust kicked up by the stagecoach wheels. Betrayal burned deeper than the ugly scar that marred her once perfect face, a cruel reminder of the fire that had claimed her family home 2 years prior and now, apparently, her future. The Dakota Territory, 1876. The crimson sun hung low over the dusty horizon, as Katherine Elliott watched her last chance at happiness disappear in a cloud of dust kicked up by the stagecoach wheels. Betrayal burned deeper than the ugly scar that marred her once perfect face, a cruel reminder of the fire that had claimed her family home 2 years prior and now, apparently, her future. "Miss Elliott," a stern voice called from behind her. "Your trunk has been delivered to the boarding house. I suggest you make your way there before nightfall." Katherine turned to face the station manager, a wiry man with thinning hair and eyes that refused to meet hers directly. She knew that look all too well, the quick glance followed by the subtle aversion, the awkward shuffle of feet. 2 years of such treatment had hardened her against the sting, but today it cut deeper. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The letter in her reticule seemed to burn through the fabric, its cruel words forever etched into her memory. "Your disfigurement makes you unsuitable as a wife to my son. I have enclosed funds for your return journey." 3 months of correspondence with William Abbott had given her hope that someone could see beyond the angry red line that ran from her temple to her jaw. His letters had been kind, thoughtful, speaking of shared interests and compatible temperaments. Not once had he mentioned her candid disclosure about her scar. But his mother's discovery of their correspondence had ended everything before it began. Katherine gathered her skirts and made her way down the single street that constituted the heart of Silvercreek. The frontier town was smaller than she had imagined. With a handful of wooden structures lining the rutted dirt rode a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and what appeared to be a newly constructed schoolhouse. In the distance, a white church steeple pierced the darkening sky. The Widow Morgan's boarding house stood at the edge of town, a 2-story clapboard structure with a sagging porch and peeling paint. Katherine hesitated at the gate, taking in the worn appearance of what would now be her temporary home until she could formulate a new plan. Continuing to Chicago seemed impossible with her limited funds, and returning to Boston held nothing but painful memories. "You going to stand there till the coyotes come howling, miss?" The voice startled Katherine from her thoughts. An older woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her ample bosom. "Mrs. Morgan, I presume?" Katherine asked, forcing a smile. The woman nodded curtly. "And you'd be the schoolteacher from back east. Thought you weren't arriving till next week." Katherine swallowed hard. "There has been a change of plans. She hesitated, unwilling to reveal the humiliation of being rejected sight unseen. "I decided to arrive early to prepare for the school term." Mrs. Morgan's sharp eyes narrowed, clearly detecting the falsehood, but she merely shrugged. "Well, your room's ready regardless. $5 a week, meals included. No gentlemen callers, no alcohol, and no coming in after 9 in the evening." "That's agreeable," Katherine replied, following the landlady into the house. The interior smelled of beeswax and fresh bread, a stark contrast to the exterior's neglected appearance. "Second floor, last door on the left," Mrs. Morgan directed, already heading toward what Katherine presumed was the kitchen. "Supper's at 6 sharp. Don't be late or you'll go hungry." The narrow staircase creaked under Katherine's weight as she climbed to the second floor. Her trunk had been delivered as promised and sat at the foot of a narrow iron bed. The room itself was small but clean, with faded floral wallpaper and a simple washstand beneath a small window that overlooked the street. Katherine sank onto the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to fall. She had risked everything on this journey west, sold her remaining possessions, resigned from her position as a governess, and traveled over 1,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met. Now she found herself stranded in a frontier town with limited funds and no prospects. She removed her bonnet, fingers automatically tracing the ridge of scar tissue. The physician had assured her the angry red color would fade with time, but after 2 years, the improvement had been minimal. The damage had done more than mar her appearance, it had altered her future, transforming her from a sought-after debutante to an object of pity and revulsion. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Supper in 10 minutes," Mrs. Morgan called. Katherine hastily wiped her tears and smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress. Self-pity would not improve her situation. She needed to find employment and lodging she could afford long-term. Perhaps the school truly did need a teacher. Her education and previous experience might prove valuable in this remote settlement. Downstairs, Katherine found the dining room occupied by 3 other boarders, an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Dr. Martin, the town's only physician, a young woman named Sarah who worked at the general store, and a rail-thin man with ink-stained fingers who mumbled something about being the newspaper editor. Mrs. Morgan ladled stew into bowls with efficiency bordering on aggression. "New boarder," she announced to the table at large. "Miss Elliott from Boston." The editor, Mr. Parker, as Katherine later learned, barely glanced up from his newspaper, but Dr. Martin smiled kindly. "Boston, you say? What brings a refined Eastern lady to our humble town?" Before Katherine could formulate a response, Sarah interjected, "Are you the one who was coming to marry William Abbott?" The direct question caught Katherine off guard, and she felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Ah, yes, that was the original plan." "Original?" Sarah pressed, leaning forward with undisguised curiosity. "What happened?" "Sarah," Mrs. Morgan scolded, though her own expression betrayed similar interest. Katherine placed her spoon beside her bowl, appetite vanishing. "Mr. Abbott's mother had concerns about the match. She felt I would not be suitable." The silence that followed confirmed what Katherine suspected. News traveled quickly in small towns. They had likely heard of her impending arrival and now would speculate endlessly about her rejection. Dr. Martin cleared his throat. "Their loss is our gain, perhaps. I understand our schoolteacher, Miss Pemberton, recently announced her engagement to a rancher in Montana Territory. The school board has been searching for a replacement." Katherine looked up, hope fluttering tentatively. "I was a governess in Boston for several years. I've taught children from ages 5 to 16. "Well then," Dr. Martin said, patting her hand, "you must speak with Mayor Collins tomorrow. He chairs the school board." For the first time since arriving, Katherine felt a small measure of optimism. Teaching was familiar territory, something she excelled at and enjoyed. If she could secure the position, she might salvage something from this disastrous journey. After dinner, Katherine escaped to the porch, seeking solitude and fresh air. Twilight had deepened into night, and stars glittered overhead with a brilliance she had never witnessed in Boston. The vastness of the sky made her feel small yet somehow less alone. "Beautiful night," a deep voice observed, startling her. Katherine turned to find a tall figure at the far end of the porch, leaning against a support post. In the dim light, she could make out broad shoulders and the silhouette of a cowboy hat. "Yes, it is," she replied cautiously, instinctively turning her scarred side away from the stranger. The man stepped forward, and moonlight revealed a ruggedly handsome face with several days' growth of beard. His eyes, crinkled at the corners, suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. "Jacob Lawson." He introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "I was just leaving Dr. Martin a message about a hand who took a fall today." "Katherine Elliott," she returned, noting his respectful distance. "You're new to Silvercreek," he observed. "Not a question, but a statement of fact." "Is it that obvious?" A smile ghosted across his face. It's a small town, Miss Elliott. New faces are noticed. Yes, I suppose they are, she said, unconsciously touching her scar. Jacob's eyes followed the movement, then returned to meet her gaze without flinching. The lack of revulsion or pity in his direct look was so unexpected that Katherine found herself momentarily speechless. I understand you might be taking over at the schoolhouse, he continued. Katherine shook her head in amazement. News truly does travel fast here. Dr. Martin mentioned it might be a possibility. My ranch hand's children attend the school. Good education's important out here. Your ranch hands. I own the Double L, about 5 miles east of town, he explained. 20 hands, 1,200 head of cattle, and more trouble than I care to admit. Despite her melancholy, Katherine found herself smiling at his candor. And you came personally to fetch the doctor for an injured worker? Most ranch owners I've known would have sent someone else. Something flickered in Jacob's eyes, approval, perhaps. I'm responsible for those who work for me. Besides, I needed supplies anyway. He nodded toward a laden pack horse tied at the hitching post. Town's not so big that the owner can't do his own errands. The front door opened, and Dr. Martin emerged with his medical bag. Ah, Jacob, I was just coming to find you. How bad is Tom's injury? Broken arm, I reckon. He's in pain but not critical. Well, let's not keep the man waiting. Good evening, Miss Elliott. The doctor tipped his hat before descending the porch steps. Jacob lingered a moment longer. If you do take the teaching position, Miss Elliott, you'll have at least 5 students from the Double L. Good children, though the Tyler boys can be a handful. Thank you for the warning, Mr. Lawson, Katherine replied, finding his easy manner oddly comforting. He touched the brim of his hat again. Until next time, Miss Elliott. Katherine watched as the 2 men mounted their horses and rode out of town. The encounter had been brief but had left her with an unexpected sense of possibility. Not all reactions would be like Mrs. Abbott's, perhaps. Not everyone would see only her scar. With renewed determination, Katherine decided to visit Mayor Collins first thing in the morning. Silvercreek might not be where she had planned to begin her new life, but maybe, just maybe, it could still be a beginning. The mayor's office occupied a small room at the back of the general store, a practical arrangement that allowed Edgar Collins to maintain his primary business while attending to civic duties. Katherine found him tallying inventory, spectacles perched on the end of his nose. Mayor Collins? She inquired after the shopkeeper directed her to the back. The mayor looked up, blinking in surprise. Yes. Can I help you, miss? My name is Katherine Elliott. I understand you're seeking a teacher for the school. Recognition dawned on his face. Ah, Miss Elliott, Dr. Martin mentioned you last evening. Please have a seat. He gestured to a wooden chair across from his desk. I must say your arrival is quite fortuitous. Miss Pemberton leaves for Montana in 2 weeks, and the fall term begins shortly thereafter. Katherine smoothed her skirts as she sat. I taught in Boston for several years mathematics, literature, history, and basic sciences. I also speak French and play the piano, though I noticed the schoolhouse doesn't have one. Mayor Collins leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. Truthfully, Miss Elliott, you're more qualified than anyone we might hope to find out here. The position pays $40 a month. With lodging included, there's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's modest but private. $40 a month was less than she had earned as a governess, but the inclusion of housing made it an attractive offer. May I see the school and cottage before making my decision? Of course, Mayor Collins agreed, rising from his chair. I can show you now if you have time. The schoolhouse stood at the north end of town, a simple structure with a bell tower and newly painted white clapboards. Inside, 4 rows of benches faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform. A large slate board covered the front wall, and maps of the United States and Europe hung on the side walls. We have 28 students currently enrolled, ages 6 to 16. Mayor Collins explained as Katherine examined the well-worn books on the shelves. Most attend regularly, though during planting and harvest, the older boys often stay home to help their families. And what subjects are taught? Reading, writing, arithmetic primarily. Some geography and history for the older students. We leave the curriculum largely to the teacher's discretion, provided the basics are covered. The cottage behind the school was indeed small, a single room with a cast iron stove for cooking and heating, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs and a bookshelf. A hand pump at the kitchen sink provided water, and an outhouse stood nearby. It's not what you might be accustomed to in Boston, Mayor Collins apologized, noting Katherine's careful examination. It's perfectly adequate, she assured him. In truth, the cottage offered more privacy and independence than her room at the boarding house, and the thought of having her own space, however modest, was appealing. Would it be possible to meet Miss Pemberton before she departs? I'd like to discuss the students and curriculum. Mayor Collins beamed. I was hoping you'd ask. She'll be at the school tomorrow morning, preparing lessons for her final week. Shall I tell her to expect you? By the time Katherine returned to the boarding house, her mind was made up. The teaching position offered stability, independence, and purpose, 3 things she desperately needed. Mrs. Morgan seemed unsurprised by her announcement that she would be moving to the teacher's cottage in 2 weeks. Figured as much, the landlady said with a nod. You've got that schoolmarm look about you, proper and educated. Children need that out here, where life's hard enough to make folks forget the value of learning. The following days passed in a flurry of activity. Katherine met with Rebecca Pemberton, a cheerful young woman whose forthcoming marriage had her practically floating with happiness. She provided detailed notes on each student, highlighting strengths, weaknesses, and potential trouble spots. The Tyler boys, Robert and Richard, they're clever but restless, Rebecca warned. Their father works at the Double L Ranch, and they've grown up in the saddle. Sitting still for lessons tests their patience. Mr. Lawson mentioned them, Katherine recalled. Rebecca smiled knowingly. Jacob's taken a special interest in those boys since their mother passed last winter. He's hard on them when needed but treats them like family. Katherine found herself filing away this information about the rancher, though she couldn't say why his character should matter to her. The school board met officially to approve her appointment, and Katherine signed a contract for the academic year. Mayor Collins provided a small advance on her salary to purchase necessary supplies, and Katherine spent several afternoons adapting Rebecca's lesson plans to incorporate some of her own ideas. She saw Jacob Lawson twice more during those 2 weeks, once at the general store, where they exchanged brief pleasantries, and again at Sunday services, where he sat with a group of men she assumed were his ranch hands. Each time, his gaze met hers directly, his eyes neither lingering on her scar nor deliberately avoiding it. His manner was respectful but warm, and Katherine found herself thinking of him at odd moments throughout her days. The evening before she was to move into the teacher's cottage, Katherine returned to the boarding house to find a wagon parked outside. Jacob stood talking with Mrs. Morgan, hat in hand. "Miss Elliott," he greeted her as she approached. "I hear you're moving to the teacher's cottage tomorrow." "Yes," she confirmed, wondering at his presence. "I've brought something that might make your new home more comfortable." He gestured toward the wagon, where Katherine spotted a rocking chair with a colorful cushion tied to the seat. "A rocking chair?" she asked, surprised by the thoughtful gesture. "Every teacher needs a proper chair for grading papers," Jacob explained, a slight flush visible beneath his tan. "This one's been sitting and used at the ranch since my mother passed. I thought you might give it a good home." Katherine stepped closer to examine the chair. It was beautifully crafted of dark oak, the wood polished to a soft sheen by years of use. The cushion was new, however, covered in cheerful calico. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "But I couldn't possibly—" "Please," Jacob interrupted. "It would honor my mother's memory to have it used by someone who values education as she did. She taught my brothers and me our letters before we ever saw the inside of a schoolhouse." The genuine sentiment in his voice silenced Catherine's protests. "Then I accept with gratitude. It's very kind of you, Mr. Lawson." "Jacob," he corrected gently. "Out here, formality doesn't last long." "Jacob?" she repeated, the name feeling comfortable on her tongue. "Thank you. I'll deliver it to the cottage in the morning, if that suits you." "That would be perfect." As Jacob climbed back onto his wagon, he paused, looking back at her. "The town's holding a harvest dance next Saturday at the schoolhouse. Tradition says the teacher must attend." Katherine felt a flutter of anxiety. She had avoided social gatherings since the fire, finding the stares and whispers unbearable. "I'm not much for dancing these days." Understanding flickered in Jacob's eyes. "Sometimes traditions need bending. But your presence would mean a lot to the community. No dancing required." After he departed, Mrs. Morgan fixed Katherine with a knowing look. "Jacob Lawson doesn't give gifts lightly." "It's just a chair," Katherine protested weakly. The landlady replied skeptically. "And I'm just a simple widow." That night, Katherine dreamed of dancing in a crowded room where no one noticed her scar, least of all the tall cowboy whose arms held her securely as they moved across the floor. Morning brought clear skies and a sense of anticipation as Katherine supervised the loading of her trunk onto Mayor Collins' wagon. The cottage awaited, and with it, a new beginning. She had just finished thanking Mrs. Morgan for her hospitality when Jacob's wagon appeared, the promised rocking chair secured in the back. "Perfect timing," Mayor Collins called. "We were just heading to the cottage." The small procession made its way through town, attracting curious glances from shopkeepers and townspeople. Katherine felt a momentary unease at being the center of attention but reminded herself that in a town this size, any change constituted news. At the cottage, Jacob carried the rocking chair inside while Mayor Collins and his son unloaded Katherine's trunk. The chair fit perfectly in the corner near the window, where afternoon light would make it an ideal spot for reading or grading. "It transforms the place," Katherine observed, genuinely pleased with how the simple addition made the cottage feel more like a home. Jacob nodded, seemingly satisfied with her reaction. "Every home needs at least one piece with history, gives it soul." Mayor Collins departed with promises to check in before the school term began, leaving Katherine and Jacob standing awkwardly in the small space that suddenly seemed much smaller. "I should let you settle in," Jacob said, reaching for his hat. "Yes, I have much to arrange before Monday," Katherine agreed, though she felt a curious reluctance to see him leave. At the door, Jacob paused. "About the harvest dance, I'll be there," Katherine surprised herself by saying. "As you said, it's tradition." A smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features into something that made Katherine's heart beat a little faster. "I'll look forward to it." After he left, Katherine stood in the center of her new home, surveying the simple space that now belonged to her alone. The rocking chair caught her eye, and she moved to sit in it, testing its comfort. The smooth motion soothed her as she considered the unexpected kindness of a man who looked her in the eye without flinching. Perhaps Silvercreek held more promise than she had initially thought. The first day of school arrived with the nervous energy that accompanies all beginnings. Katherine rose before dawn, donned her most professional dress, a navy blue wool with white collar and cuffs, and arranged her hair in a simple but tidy knot at the nape of her neck. She had decided against trying to conceal her scar. The children would notice regardless, and addressing it directly seemed the wiser course. As the school bell rang, Students began to arrive, some eagerly, others with the reluctance typical of children facing the end of summer freedom. Katherine stood at the door, greeting each one by name, having memorized Rebecca's notes. The Tyler boys arrived last, racing each other on matching ponies that they tied to the hitching post with practiced ease. They were clearly brothers, with the same sandy hair and mischievous green eyes, though Robert was taller by several inches. "Miss Elliott," they greeted in unison, tipping their hats like miniature cowboys. "Robert, Richard," she acknowledged. "Please find your seats. We're about to begin." The morning progressed more smoothly than Katherine had dared hope. After introducing herself and addressing the obvious question of her scar with a simple explanation, "I was caught in a fire 2 years ago. Yes, it hurt. No, it doesn't anymore. And no, it doesn't affect my ability to teach or your ability to learn." The children seemed to accept her as their new teacher without reservation. By midday, Katherine had assessed reading levels, assigned appropriate texts, and begun to identify which students would need additional attention. The Tyler boys, as Rebecca had warned, were bright but restless, though they responded well to being given special responsibilities like distributing slates and collecting readers. When the final bell rang, Katherine felt a sense of accomplishment that had been missing from her life for too long. She was gathering her materials when a shadow darkened the doorway. "Successful first day?" Jacob asked, leaning against the frame with casual ease. Katherine couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "Very. Your Tyler boys are indeed a handful, but intelligent and eager when properly engaged." "They speak highly of you," Jacob said, entering the classroom. "Richard informed me at lunch that you know more about dinosaur bones than any person alive, and Robert was impressed by your explanation of how steam engines work." Katherine laughed. "I may have embellished slightly on both counts to capture their interest. Boys their age need subjects that excite their imagination." Jacob nodded, moving closer to examine the map she had been using during the geography lesson. "Teaching has always seemed like a special kind of magic to me, turning words on a page into knowledge in a child's mind." "It's not so different from what you do," Katherine observed. "Taking calves and turning them into a productive herd requires its own form of teaching." Jacob looked up, surprise and appreciation in his gaze. "Not many people make that connection. Perhaps they should pay closer attention," Katherine replied, gathering her books into a neat stack. "Perhaps," Jacob agreed, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I actually came to ask if you need anything for the cottage. I'm heading to the larger trading post in Bismarck tomorrow and could pick up items not available here." The offer was practical but felt personal in a way that warmed Katherine. "That's very thoughtful. I could use some writing paper and perhaps some fabric for curtains. The morning sun is quite bright." "Consider it done," Jacob said. "Any preference on color for the fabric? Something cheerful yellow perhaps, or blue?" Jacob nodded, committing her request to memory. "I'll return day after tomorrow. The boys know to come to school regardless." After he left, Katherine found herself wondering at the frequency of their encounters. Silvercreek was small, certainly, but Jacob seemed to appear in her path with regularity that suggested more than coincidence. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The remainder of the week established a rhythm to Katherine's new life. Mornings were devoted to teaching, afternoons to grading and preparation, and evenings to reading or taking walks around the small town. She discovered a creek just beyond the schoolyard that provided a peaceful spot for reflection, and several times she brought a book there to read in the fading daylight. True to his word, Jacob returned from Bismarck with writing paper and 2 lengths of fabric, one sunny yellow, the other sky blue. "I couldn't decide," he admitted when he delivered them to the cottage. "They're both perfect," Katherine assured him, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "I can use the blue for the kitchen window and the yellow for the bedroom." I also brought this, Jacob added, producing a small potted plant with delicate white flowers. Desert primrose, tough little plant that blooms against all odds. Reminded me of someone. The comparison wasn't lost on Katherine, and she felt a blush rising to her cheeks. Thank you. It's lovely. As Saturday approached, Katherine found herself increasingly anxious about the harvest dance. She had only one dress suitable for a social occasion, a green silk that had been her favorite before the fire. She had kept it despite having no opportunity to wear it, a reminder of the life she had lost. The evening of the dance arrived clear and cool, with a harvest moon hanging low in the sky. Katherine stood before the small mirror in her cottage, studying her reflection. The green silk complemented her auburn hair and brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, but it also seemed to emphasize the stark white scar that ran down the left side of her face. For a moment, she considered not going, claiming illness or fatigue. But something in her rebelled against hiding away, against letting fear dictate her choices as it had for the past 2 years. The schoolhouse had been transformed in her absence. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the room. The benches had been pushed against the walls to create a dance floor, and a small group of musicians, a fiddler, guitarist, and banjo player, tuned their instruments in the corner. Katherine slipped in quietly, hoping to observe before being observed, but Mayor Collins spotted her immediately. "Miss Elliott, you look lovely," he declared, beckoning her forward to introduce her to his wife, a plump, pleasant woman who insisted Katherine call her Harriet. "Such a blessing to have a proper teacher for our children," Harriet gushed. "And Jacob Lawson can't say enough good things about you. He's quite taken, if you ask me." "Harriet," the mayor admonished gently, "don't embarrass Miss Elliott." But Katherine found herself scanning the room for Jacob, curious despite herself. She spotted him across the room, deep in conversation with Dr. Martin. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the crowded space. Jacob excused himself and made his way toward her, navigating through groups of townspeople with easy grace. He wore a clean white shirt under a dark vest, his usual cowboy hat absent, revealing hair the color of rich coffee, slightly too long and curling at the edges. "Miss Elliott," he greeted her, eyes appreciating the green silk. "You look beautiful." The simple compliment, delivered without qualification or pity, made Katherine's breath catch. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Lawson." His smile deepened at her teasing formality. "May I get you some punch? Mrs. Peterson makes it with wild berries. It's worth the inevitable stained lips." "I would like that," Katherine agreed, finding herself relaxing in his presence. As Jacob moved toward the refreshment table, Sarah from the boarding house appeared at Katherine's side. "He hasn't taken his eyes off you since you arrived," she whispered conspiratorially. "Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for Jacob Lawson, but he's never shown particular interest in any of them." "We're merely acquaintances," Katherine protested weakly. Sarah raised a skeptical eyebrow. "That's not what his face says when he looks at you." Before Katherine could respond, Jacob returned with 2 cups of deep red punch. "Ladies," he acknowledged Sarah with a nod before returning his attention to Katherine. Sarah winked at Katherine before melting back into the crowd, leaving them alone despite the room full of people. "Are you enjoying Silvercreek so far?" Jacob asked, sipping his punch. "More than I expected to," Katherine admitted honestly. "The children are eager to learn, and everyone has been welcoming." "Even the widow Morgan?" Jacob asked with a twinkle in his eye. Katherine laughed. "Even she has her moments of warmth, though they're carefully rationed." The music began, a lively reel that soon had couples forming on the dance floor. Katherine watched, a familiar ache of loss squeezing her heart as she remembered dancing at Boston society balls, before the fire had changed everything. Jacob seemed to read her thoughts. "Would you care to step outside for some air? It gets rather warm in here once the dancing starts." Grateful for the suggestion, Katherine nodded. They made their way through the crowded room to the front steps, where the cool night air provided welcome relief. "You miss dancing," Jacob observed. Not a question but a gentle acknowledgement. Katherine nodded, seeing no point in denial. "I used to love it, but now," she gestured vaguely toward her face. "The scar doesn't make you any less graceful," Jacob said quietly. "Or any less beautiful." Katherine turned to him, searching his face for signs of insincerity or pity, but found only genuine admiration. "Most people can't see past it." "Most people are fools," Jacob replied simply. "I've seen men with scars from war, women with burns from prairie fires, children marked by disease. Out here, survival leaves its marks on all of us, some visible, some not." His understanding, so freely offered, loosened something tight in Katherine's chest. "When I was rejected by William Abbott's mother," she began, then stopped, embarrassed to have revealed so much. "Is that why you came to Silvercreek? To marry Abbott?" Jacob asked, his tone carefully neutral. Katherine nodded. "We had corresponded for months. He seemed kind, intelligent. I told him about my appearance, and he said it didn't matter. But his mother intercepted my last letter, which included a photograph. She sent me away the moment I arrived, said no son of hers would marry a woman so disfigured." Anger flashed in Jacob's eyes. "A man who lets his mother make such decisions isn't worth your time, Katherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "Perhaps it was for the best," she conceded. "I might never have found my way here otherwise." Jacob's expression softened. "I'm glad you did." He hesitated, then added, "Would you dance with me, Katherine? Not here with everyone watching, but someday." The question, so unexpected and yet so perfectly aligned with her earlier thoughts, brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "I would like that very much." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. From inside, the music changed to a slower waltz, the melody drifting out to where they stood. "May I?" Jacob asked, offering his hand. Katherine placed her fingers in his, and he drew her gently into the shadows beside the schoolhouse. There, away from curious eyes, he placed his other hand respectfully at her waist, and they began to move to the distant music. Under the vast Dakota sky, with stars as their only witnesses, Katherine danced for the first time in 2 years. Jacob led with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback, and as they moved together in the darkness, Katherine felt something long dormant stirring back to life. When the music ended, they remained standing close, neither willing to break the spell of the moment. Jacob's hand moved from her waist to gently touch her cheek, fingers lightly tracing the path of her scar. "Beautiful," he murmured, and then he kissed her, a feather-light touch that asked rather than demanded. Katherine responded without hesitation, her heart recognizing what her mind was only beginning to understand, that sometimes the longest journeys lead exactly where we need to go, even when the destination wasn't what we had planned. When they finally parted, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I should take you home before we're missed." Katherine nodded, reluctant to end the evening but aware of the small town's propensity for gossip. They walked back inside to make their goodbyes, and if anyone noticed their slightly flushed faces or the way Jacob's hand rested lightly at the small of Katherine's back, they were kind enough not to comment directly. As they walked the short distance to her cottage, Katherine felt a curious mixture of peace and excitement. Whatever was beginning between them felt right in a way that her correspondence with William Abbott never had, perhaps because Jacob saw her, truly saw her, both the scar and the woman who carried it. At her door, Jacob kissed her again, this time with more certainty. "Good night, Katherine Elliott. I'll call on you properly tomorrow, if I may." "I'd like that," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. As she prepared for bed that night, Katherine found herself humming the waltz they had danced to, her body still remembering the feel of Jacob's hand at her waist, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the gentle way he had touched her scar without revulsion. For the first time since the fire, Katherine fell asleep without tracing the ridge of damaged tissue, without wondering what might have been if fate had been kinder. Instead, she dreamed of open skies and strong hands and possibilities she had thought forever lost to her. The following weeks brought a deepening of their connection. Jacob called on Katherine every Sunday after church, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wild honey from a hive his ranch hands had discovered, a handkerchief embroidered by one of the women who cooked for his crew. They took walks along the creek, shared meals at the hotel restaurant, and gradually, Katherine learned the story of the man who was becoming increasingly important to her. Jacob had inherited the double L from his father 5 years earlier, expanding it from a modest operation to one of the most successful ranches in the territory. He had lost his mother to influenza when he was 16, and his father had never remarried, teaching his 3 sons to manage both household and ranch operations. "My brothers headed to California 2 years ago, caught up in silver fever," Jacob explained one Sunday as they sat by the creek. "I stayed. This land gets in your blood. I can't imagine being anywhere else." "Do you ever get lonely?" Katherine asked, watching a pair of meadowlarks chase each other through the tall grass. Jacob considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. The men are good company, and there's always work to be done. But," he paused, looking at her directly. "Yes, I get lonely." The admission, so honest and unguarded, touched Katherine deeply. "I understand loneliness," she said softly. "Even in Boston, surrounded by people, I was often alone. After the fire, it became worse. People who had been friends suddenly couldn't meet my eyes, couldn't move past what they saw." Jacob took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Their loss," he said simply. "You're the most interesting person in this territory, Katherine Elliott." As October gave way to November, the first snow dusted the prairie, transforming the landscape overnight. School continued, with Katherine introducing her students to Shakespeare, advanced mathematics, and the principles of scientific inquiry. The Tyler boys flourished under her attention, their natural restlessness channeled into experiments and special projects. Jacob's visits became a fixture in Katherine's life, as regular as the school bell and infinitely more anticipated. The entire town observed their courtship with varying degrees of interest and approval. Most, like Mayor Collins and Dr. Martin, seemed genuinely pleased. A few, particularly mothers with unmarried daughters, were less enthusiastic. "You realize you're the subject of considerable speculation," Sarah informed Katherine one Saturday as they shopped at the general store. "Mrs. Peterson is already planning what she'll bake for the wedding." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "There's been no proposal, Sarah." "Yet," Sarah corrected with a knowing smile. "Jacob Lawson didn't build that addition to his ranch house for himself. Everyone knows he's been planning for a wife." This was news to Katherine. "What addition?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh, you didn't know? He's added 2 rooms to the main house over the past month, a larger bedroom, and what looks suspiciously like a library. Thomas at the lumber yard said Jacob specifically asked about shelving for books." The information left Katherine feeling both flustered and deeply moved. While they had spoken often of feelings growing between them, neither had explicitly discussed marriage. The idea that Jacob might be preparing his home for her, creating space for her books and her comfort, seemed almost too much to hope for. That evening, as Katherine lit the lamps in her cottage, A knock at the door announced Jacob's unexpected arrival. He stood on her porch, snowflakes melting in his hair, his expression serious. "Jacob, is everything all right? May I come in? There's something I need to discuss with you." Concern flickered through Katherine as she stepped aside to let him enter. He removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands, an uncharacteristic gesture for a man usually so composed. "What's wrong?" she asked, unable to read his expression. "Nothing's wrong," he assured her quickly. "I had planned to wait until Christmas to do this properly," but he took a deep breath. "Katherine, I've loved you since the moment I saw you on Mrs. Morgan's porch, trying so hard to be brave when your heart was breaking." Katherine felt her own breath catch as Jacob continued. "I've never been one for fancy words or grand gestures. I'm a simple man with a ranch that needs a woman's touch and a heart that needs you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife." He opened the box to reveal a gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. Katherine stared at it, overwhelmed by emotions she had thought forever lost to her. "Jacob, she began, then faltered, tears blurring her vision. Concern crossed his face. "If it's too soon—" "No," Katherine interrupted, finding her voice. "It's not that. I just never thought I would find someone who could look at me and see me, not just the scar." Jacob set the box on the table and took her face in his hands, thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "The first time I saw you, I noticed your courage, your dignity, your kindness. The scar is part of you, yes, but only a small part. I love all of you. Katherine Elliott, your brilliant mind, your gentle heart, your strength. I ain't looking for perfect, just honest, and you're the most honest person I've ever known." The simple truth in his declaration broke the last of Katherine's hesitation. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Jacob Lawson." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. When he kissed her, Katherine felt the last shadows of her past recede, replaced by the bright promise of a future she had never dared imagine. News of their engagement spread through Silvercreek with predictable speed. By Monday morning, Katherine's students greeted her with knowing smiles and thinly veiled curiosity, the younger ones bold enough to ask to see her ring. "Are you going to stop being our teacher when you marry Mr. Lawson?" 6-year-old Mary Peterson asked with concern. "No, Mary," Katherine assured her. "I'll continue teaching until the end of the school year at least. After that, we'll see." The Tyler boys seemed particularly pleased by the development. "Does this mean you'll be our aunt?" Richard asked during the noon recess. "Not exactly," Katherine explained, "but I'll be part of your extended ranch family." Robert nodded sagely. "Mr. Lawson's been happier since you came. He whistles when he thinks no one's listening." The innocent observation warmed Katherine's heart more than all the formal congratulations she received from the townspeople. Jacob proposed a Christmas wedding, allowing time for Katherine's few remaining relatives in Boston to travel west if they wished. Letters were dispatched, arrangements made, and in the midst of the whirlwind of planning, Katherine found moments of pure joy that continued to surprise her with their intensity. The first time she visited the Double L, riding beside Jacob in his wagon, Katherine was struck by the beauty of the rolling prairie landscape. The ranch house stood on a gentle rise, with outbuildings arranged in a protective semicircle behind it. A creek, partially frozen now, curved around the property, and in the distance, cattle grazed on winter grass. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the vastness of the sky and land. "It's home," Jacob replied simply, helping her down from the wagon. "Or it will be when you're here." He showed her the house with a mixture of pride and uncertainty, clearly hoping she would approve of the changes he had made. The main room was large, with a stone fireplace and solid furniture built to last. The kitchen beyond was well equipped but clearly a bachelor's domain, with function prioritized over comfort. The new additions made Katherine catch her breath. The bedroom was spacious, with large windows facing east to catch the morning light. But it was the library that brought tears to her eyes, walls lined with empty shelves waiting for books, a desk positioned to capture the best light, and in the corner, a rocking chair identical to the one Jacob had given her for the cottage. "You built all this for me?" she asked, running her hand along the smooth wood of the shelves. "For us," Jacob corrected gently. "I want you to feel at home here, to have space for the things that matter to you." Katherine turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It's perfect." "Not yet," Jacob said, drawing her into his arms. "But it will be when your books fill these shelves, when your voice fills these rooms, when our children run through that door." The mention of children, a future she had stopped allowing herself to imagine, filled Katherine with a bittersweet longing. "Jacob, I need to ask, does it bother you that our children might inherit my scar?" Jacob's expression grew serious. "Katherine, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "If our children inherit your intelligence, your courage, your heart, they will be blessed beyond measure. A scar is nothing compared to the legacy of who you are." The weeks leading to Christmas passed in a blur of preparation. Katherine continued teaching, now dividing her time between school responsibilities and wedding plans. Jacob made regular trips to Bismarck for supplies that couldn't be obtained in Silvercreek, returning with fabric for a wedding dress, special foods for the celebration, and once, a piano for the church that he claimed was a gift from the ranchers in the area but which Katherine suspected came primarily from his own funds. Katherine's aunt and uncle declined to travel from Boston, citing the winter weather, but sent a generous gift and warm wishes. Their absence stung less than it might have, surrounded as she was by the community that had become her family in such a short time. Sarah helped Katherine sew her wedding dress, ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Simple but elegant. Mrs. Morgan, beneath her gruff exterior, proved to be an excellent baker and took charge of the wedding cake. Mayor Collins offered the town hall for the reception, and every family in Silvercreek contributed something to the celebration. The day before the wedding, a blizzard descended on the territory, blanketing the landscape in white and raising fears that the ceremony might need postponement. Katherine stood at her cottage window, watching the swirling snow with a calm that surprised her. "You don't seem concerned," Sarah observed, putting the final stitches in the wedding dress. "If we can't marry tomorrow, we'll marry the next day, or the day after," Katherine replied. "Jacob will come for me, snow or no snow." As if summoned by her faith, a figure on horseback emerged from the white haze, moving steadily toward the cottage. Katherine recognized Jacob's form even before he dismounted and stomped the snow from his boots on her porch. "I thought you might be worried," he explained when she opened the door, his face red with cold but his eyes warm. "The storm should pass by morning. Dr. Martin says it's moving fast." "I wasn't worried," Katherine assured him, drawing him inside and helping him remove his snow-covered coat. "I knew you'd come." Sarah discreetly gathered her sewing supplies. "I'll leave you two alone. See you in the morning, weather permitting." After she left, Jacob took Katherine's hands in his. "Last chance to change your mind," he teased, though a hint of genuine question lingered in his eyes. Katherine shook her head. "Not a chance, Jacob Lawson. You're stuck with me now." His smile was answer enough, but the kiss that followed left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jacob pressed his forehead to hers. "Until tomorrow, then." "Until tomorrow," she echoed. True to Dr. Martin's prediction, the storm passed during the night, leaving a pristine white landscape under clear blue skies. The temperature remained bitterly cold, but the roads were passable, and by noon, The church was filled with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area. Katherine stood in the small anteroom, Sarah fussing with the drape of her dress, a bouquet of hothouse flowers from Bismarck trembling slightly in her gloved hands. Through the door, she could hear the murmur of voices, the occasional laugh, and the soft notes of the new piano as someone practiced the wedding march. "You look beautiful," Sarah declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Jacob won't know what hit him. A knock at the door heralded Dr. Martin, who had offered to walk Katherine down the aisle in the absence of her relatives. "Ready, my dear? Your groom is looking rather anxious to begin." Katherine took a deep breath, smoothing her dress one last time. "I'm ready." The church fell silent as the piano began the wedding march. Katherine stepped through the doorway on Dr. Martin's arm, but her eyes saw only Jacob, waiting for her at the altar. He wore a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, but it was his expression that caught and held her, a mixture of wonder, joy, and absolute certainty that made her heart swell. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Katherine remembered the warmth of Jacob's hands holding hers, the steady timbre of his voice as he spoke his vows, the gentle way he slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob's kiss was both a promise and a fulfillment, witnessed by the community that had brought them together. The reception at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the entire town could consume. Katherine danced with her husband, no longer hidden in shadows but in the center of the floor, her scar visible to all but seeming to matter to none. As the celebration continued, Jacob drew her aside, his expression suddenly serious. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner. From his pocket he withdrew an envelope. "Open it." Inside, Katherine found a deed to the schoolhouse and teacher's cottage. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him in confusion. "I purchased them from the town," Jacob explained. "The school board was concerned about finding a replacement when you became my wife. This way you can continue teaching as long as you wish. The cottage can serve as a place for you to prepare lessons or stay if weather prevents travel to the ranch. You'll have independence along with our marriage." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "You understood what teaching means to me without my having to explain it. I want you to be happy, Katherine, not just as my wife, but as yourself, the remarkable woman I fell in love with." When they finally departed for the ranch, riding in a sleigh Jacob had borrowed for the occasion, Katherine felt a peace she had not known since before the fire. The stars overhead seemed to bless their journey, and the ranch house, windows glowing with welcome light, looked like a haven against the winter landscape. Jacob carried her across the threshold, setting her down gently in the main room where a fire blazed in the hearth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson." The name, still new and wonderful to her ears, made Katherine smile. "It sounds right, doesn't it?" "It sounds perfect," Jacob agreed, drawing her into his arms. That night, as snow began to fall again outside their window, Katherine discovered that Jacob's tenderness extended to every aspect of their relationship. His hands traced the path of her scar with reverence, his lips followed, and in the safety of his embrace, Katherine finally let go of the last of her self-consciousness. In loving her completely, Jacob taught her to love herself again, scars and all. Spring came to the Dakota Territory with sudden intensity, snow giving way to vibrant green almost overnight. Katherine divided her time between teaching and learning the rhythms of ranch life. The library Jacob had built for her gradually filled with books, the shelves also holding treasures collected on their walks, interesting stones, bird feathers, a perfectly preserved butterfly. She continued teaching, riding to and from the schoolhouse on a gentle mare Jacob had trained specifically for her. The students thrived under her guidance, and when the school year ended, The town board unanimously requested her return in the fall. "You've transformed that school," Jacob observed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson. "The children talk about nothing but Miss Catherine's lessons when they visit the ranch." Catherine smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I love teaching them. They're so hungry for knowledge, so curious about the world beyond Silvercreek. Like you were, I imagine, as a child." "Yes," she admitted. "Books were my window to places I might never see. Now I want to give them that same gift." Jacob was silent for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Would you miss it terribly, the wider world? Sometimes I worry that this life is too confined for someone with your education and background." The question surprised Katherine. "Do you think I'm unhappy here?" "No," Jacob said quickly. "But I wonder sometimes if you might want more than Silvercreek and the Double L can offer." Katherine turned to face him fully. "Jacob Lawson, in Boston I had access to museums, concerts, lectures, and social gatherings. I also had loneliness, pity, and constant reminders of what I had lost. Here, I have purpose, community, and a husband who loves me completely. There is nothing in the wider world I want that I don't already have right here." The sincerity in her voice seemed to ease whatever doubt had prompted his question. Jacob kissed her softly, then more deeply, and the conversation was forgotten in the more immediate expression of their love. Summer brought its own rhythm to the ranch cattle drives, hay cutting, endless days of sunshine that stretched well into the evening hours. Katherine found unexpected joy in the domestic aspects of ranch life, learning to make cheese from one of the Mexican vaqueros' wives, tending a vegetable garden that flourished under her care, and hosting Sunday dinners for the ranch hands who had no families nearby. In late July, as the heat shimmered across the prairie, Katherine confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was expecting their first child. The news, shared with Jacob as they watched fireflies dance in the twilight, brought tears to his eyes. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Due in February, Dr. Martin thinks," Katherine said, covering his hand with her own. "He says I'm in excellent health and should have no difficulties." Jacob's expression grew serious. "You'll need to be careful, especially when winter comes. Perhaps we should consider hiring an assistant for the school. Someone who could take over if the weather turns bad or if you need rest." Katherine had already considered this. Sarah mentioned that her younger sister is coming from Pennsylvania next month. She has some teaching experience and might be willing to help. Jacob nodded, always practical even in moments of emotion. "We'll make sure you have whatever support you need. This ranch has waited generations for its next Lawson. I want both mother and child safe and well." As her pregnancy progressed, Katherine found herself surrounded by care and attention, not only from Jacob but from the entire community. The women of Silvercreek shared remedies for morning sickness and fatigue, brought gifts of tiny handmade garments, and offered advice both solicited and unsolicited. The ranch hands treated her with a mixture of protective concern and awkward reverence, as if her condition made her simultaneously more fragile and more powerful. Katherine continued teaching through the fall term, with Sarah's sister Martha assisting when needed. The students were fascinated by their teacher's changing body, the younger ones asking innocent questions that sometimes made the older children blush. "Will the baby have a scar like yours, Miss Katherine?" 7-year-old Emma asked one day during lunch. Before Katherine could respond, Robert Tyler answered confidently, "Scars aren't something you're born with, Emma. They're marks of what you've lived through, like badges of courage." The simple wisdom from a boy who had lost his mother and found family among the ranch community brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "That's exactly right, Robert. Well said." As winter approached again, Jacob insisted on additional preparations for the baby's arrival. He expanded the bedroom to include a nursery alcove, commissioned a cradle from the town's carpenter, and stockpiled supplies in case the weather prevented travel to town when the time came. "You're planning for every possible contingency," Katherine observed as he installed extra shelving for baby necessities. "That's what ranchers do," Jacob replied with a smile. "Plan for the worst while hoping for the best." Christmas came, marking their first anniversary with quiet celebration. The ranch house, decorated with pine boughs and candles, felt like the home Katherine had always longed for but never expected to find. Jacob's gift to her was a locket containing a miniature of the two of them, painted by an artist passing through Bismarck. "For our child to know their parents as they were when they began," he explained as she admired the tiny portrait. Katherine's gift to him was a hand-bound book containing the story of their courtship, written in her elegant script and illustrated with pressed flowers from their walks, ticket stubs from their journey to Bismarck, and other mementos of their time together. "So our history isn't lost," she said as Jacob turned the pages with careful fingers. "So our child will know the story of how they came to be." January brought bitter cold and relentless snow, confining Katherine largely to the ranch house. Dr. Martin made regular visits, pronounced her healthy but advised rest, and left detailed instructions with Jacob and the ranch's cook, Mrs. Ramirez, for what to do when labor began. On a clear, bitterly cold February morning, Katherine woke to the first contractions. Jacob, who had taken to sleeping lightly in anticipation of this moment, was immediately alert. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and concern. Katherine nodded, a wave of pain preventing speech momentarily. When it passed, she managed, "Send for Dr. Martin, but don't panic. First babies often take their time." Jacob was already pulling on his clothes. "I'll send Miguel, he's the fastest rider. Mrs. Ramirez is already here. She stayed overnight as we planned." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain, waiting, and brief moments of clarity. Dr. Martin arrived by mid-morning, his presence reassuring despite the worry lines creasing his forehead as the labor progressed. "The babies turned awkwardly," he explained to Jacob in a low voice that Katherine wasn't meant to hear. "We may need to help things along." Jacob's face paled, but his voice remained steady. "Do whatever you must, doctor. Save them both if you can." But he swallowed hard. "Katherine comes first." The pain intensified as afternoon turned to evening. Katherine drifted in and out of awareness, anchored by Jacob's hand gripping hers, his voice a constant reassurance in her ear. "You're the strongest person I know, Katherine Lawson. You can do this. Stay with me." Just as Dr. Martin prepared to intervene, Katherine felt a shift, a sudden clarity amidst the pain, and with one final, tremendous effort, brought their child into the world. "A girl, dear," Martin announced, his voice thick with relief. "A perfect little girl." Jacob's face, when Katherine could focus on it again, was transformed by wonder and love. Tears streamed unashamedly down his cheeks as Dr. Martin placed the swaddled infant in his arms. "She's beautiful," he whispered, bringing the baby close for Katherine to see. "Like her mother." Through exhausted eyes, Katherine studied her daughter's face, the rosebud mouth, the wisp of dark hair, the perfect unmarked skin. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "We've been waiting for you." Later, after Dr. Martin had departed with promises to return the next day, after Mrs. Ramirez had changed the bedding and helped Katherine into a fresh nightgown, after the ranch hands had been given the news and sent a rider to town to spread the word, Jacob sat beside his wife on their bed, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "What shall we name her?" he asked, gently stroking the baby's cheek with one finger. Katherine had been thinking about this for months. "I'd like to call her Rose," she said, "for new beginnings and beauty that flourishes despite thorns." Jacob nodded, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. Rose Lawson. It suits her. He looked up at Katherine, his expression serious. I thought I might lose you today. Never, Katherine promised, reaching for his hand. We've only just begun our story, Jacob. There are many chapters yet to write. As February gave way to March, and the first signs of spring appeared on the prairie, Katherine recovered her strength. Rose thrived, growing plumper by the day, her eyes darkening to match her father's. The ranch settled into a new rhythm that accommodated midnight feedings and afternoon naps, diaper washing, and the constant wonder of watching a new life unfold. Katherine decided to delay her return to teaching until the fall, wanting these precious months with her daughter. Sarah's sister Martha continued in her place, coming to the ranch once a week to consult on lesson plans and report on the students' progress. Visitors came regularly, curious townspeople bearing gifts, former students eager to see Miss Katherine's baby, ranch wives with practical advice and knowing smiles. The Tyler boys appointed themselves Rose's unofficial protectors, checking on her progress with the seriousness of much older brothers. She doesn't have a scar, Richard observed one day as he watched Katherine nurse the baby. No, she doesn't, Katherine agreed. But she will someday, Robert added thoughtfully. Everyone gets them, one way or another. Katherine smiled at the boy's perception. That's true. And when she does, we'll teach her that scars are just part of the story, not the whole book. As Rose grew from infant to toddler, Katherine found new joy in seeing the world through her daughter's eyes. The simplest things, a butterfly landing on a flower, rain puddles reflecting the sky, the texture of grass against bare feet, became sources of wonder when experienced alongside a child discovering them for the first time. Jacob proved to be a devoted father, as natural with a baby in his arms as he was on horseback. He built Rose a swing that hung from the oak tree near the house, carved wooden animals for her to play with, and spent hours simply watching her sleep, as if memorizing every feature of her face. She looks like you, he told Katherine one evening as they sat on the porch, Rose dozing in Katherine's lap. Same determined chin, same thoughtful expression. She has your eyes, Katherine replied. And I think she'll have your height. Look how long her legs are getting. Jacob chuckled, then grew serious. Do you ever regret it? Coming west, ending up here instead of with Abbott? Katherine considered the question, though the answer had been clear to her for a long time. If I had married William Abbott, I would have had a comfortable life, perhaps, but not a full one. I would never have known what it means to be truly loved, to be seen completely. I would never have found my place in the world. She looked down at Rose, then back at her husband. No, Jacob, I don't regret a single step of the journey that brought me here. The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising. Rose was joined by a brother, James, born with less drama than his sister but equal joy. Katherine returned to teaching, eventually establishing a high school program that prepared Silvercreek's children for college if they chose that path. Jacob expanded the Double L, introducing new breeding stock that improved the quality of his herd and increased the ranch's prosperity. Silvercreek grew as well, the railroad's arrival bringing new businesses and settlers. Katherine's school gained a reputation for excellence that drew students from surrounding communities, and Jacob's innovative ranching methods were studied and adopted by others in the territory. Through it all, their partnership deepened, strengthened by shared purpose and unwavering commitment. The scar that had once defined Katherine's life became merely one detail in a rich tapestry of experience, visible but no longer significant except as a reminder of resilience. On their 10th anniversary, Jacob surprised Katherine with a journey east to Boston, where she had not returned since leaving for the frontier. They took Rose and James, now 8 and 6, to show them the world their mother had come from. Standing in the public garden where she had once walked as a debutante, Katherine felt a curious detachment from her former life. The city was as beautiful as she remembered, The culture is rich, the society is structured, but it no longer felt like home. "What are you thinking?" Jacob asked, watching her expression as their children fed the swans in the pond. "I'm thinking about the young woman who left here believing her life was over because of a scar," Katherine replied. "I wish I could tell her what was waiting in Dakota Territory, not just a husband and children, but purpose and community and a chance to become the person she was meant to be." Jacob squeezed her hand. "Perhaps that's why we're here, so you can make peace with that young woman's ghost." Katherine nodded, understanding the truth in his words. "I think I have, finally." That evening, at a reception hosted by her aunt and uncle, Katherine encountered people from her past, former friends, acquaintances, even the mother of a young man who had once courted her. Some still averted their eyes from her scar. Others stared openly, curiosity overcoming manners. But none of their reactions touched her as they once would have. "Mrs. Lawson," a familiar voice said, and Katherine turned to find William Abbott's mother, older now but still rigidly proper. "I was surprised to hear you had returned to Boston." "Only briefly," Katherine replied, keeping her voice even. "My husband wanted our children to see the city." Mrs. Abbott's gaze flickered to Jacob, who stood across the room in conversation with Katherine's uncle, then to Rose and James, who were being admired by a group of distant cousins. "I see. You appear to have done well for yourself." "I have been blessed beyond measure," Katherine agreed, no longer needing this woman's approval or understanding. Mrs. Abbott hesitated, then added, "William married a senator's daughter. They live in Washington now. No children, unfortunately." Katherine heard the regret in the woman's voice and felt an unexpected surge of pity. "I'm sorry to hear that. Children are a profound joy." Later, as they prepared for bed in their hotel room, Katherine recounted the conversation to Jacob. "I used to dream about confronting her, telling her how wrong she was to judge me by a scar. But when the moment came, I realized she had done me a favor. If she hadn't sent me away, I might never have found you." Jacob pulled her into his arms. "Then I'm grateful to the misguided woman, though her son missed out on the most remarkable wife any man could hope for." Their return to Dakota was a homecoming in the truest sense. The familiar landscape spreading to the horizon, the ranch house waiting on its gentle rise, the smell of sage and prairie grass, all of it spoke of belonging in a way Boston never had, even before the fire. As the years passed, Katherine's scar faded further, becoming a silvery line rather than an angry red mark. Sometimes, catching her reflection in a mirror or window, she barely noticed it herself. It had become so much a part of her that she could no longer imagine her face without it. Rose grew into a young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's quiet strength. She excelled in school and announced her intention to attend college in the East, a plan her parents supported wholeheartedly. James, more drawn to the ranch than academics, shadowed his father and dreamed of expanding the Double L further when his time came. On their 25th anniversary, Jacob and Katherine stood together on the porch where they had spent so many evenings, watching the sun set over land that had sustained them, challenged them, and ultimately become the foundation of their shared life. "Did you ever imagine this?" Katherine asked, her head resting against Jacob's shoulder. "That night at the harvest dance, when you asked me to step outside, did you see all this unfolding?" Jacob considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Not the details," he admitted. "But I knew, even then, that you were the beginning of something extraordinary. I knew I wanted to build a life with you, whatever shape it might take." Katherine smiled, remembering the young schoolteacher who had arrived in Silvercreek with a broken heart and limited hopes. "I was so afraid then, afraid of rejection, afraid of being seen, afraid of hoping for too much. And now?" Jacob asked, turning to face her fully, his hands gently framing her face, thumbs tracing the familiar path of her scar. Now I know that the most beautiful lives are built from broken pieces, Katherine replied, covering his hands with her own. That healing doesn't mean erasing the damage but incorporating it into something new and stronger. That love doesn't ask for perfection, only honesty. Jacob's smile, still able to quicken her heart after all these years, was answer enough. But he added, in the straightforward way that had first captured her attention so long ago, I told you then, and it still holds true, I ain't looking for perfect, just honest. And you, Katherine Lawson, are the most honestly beautiful woman I've ever known. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, two figures silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the house behind them, a house filled with books and memories, with children's laughter and quiet conversations, with plans made and fulfilled and reimagined over a quarter-century of shared life. And in that moment, watching the first stars appear in the vast Dakota sky, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that her scar, once a mark of tragedy and loss, had become instead the beginning of her true story, the first line in a tale of resilience, purpose, and love that would continue long after she and Jacob were gone, carried forward in their children and the community they had helped to build. It was not the life she had once imagined for herself, but it was infinitely richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything she could have planned. All because a cowboy had looked past her scar to see the woman beneath, had offered not pity but partnership, and had shown her that honest love was more enduring than superficial perfection could ever be.